The galaxy threatened Earth. Humanity responded with extinction. The stars had watched humanity crawl out of caves and build cities that touched the sky, and for thousands of years, no one from beyond the darkness had cared enough to visit. That changed on a cold morning in December, when 300 warships appeared above Earth like metal clouds blocking out the sun. The Conclave of 12 had ruled the galaxy for 3 million years, and they had a simple way of dealing with new species. Crush them before they become a threat. Ambassador Vorath of the Kethrani stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked down at the blue planet below him with something between boredom and disgust. He had done this many times before, and it always ended the same way. The primitives would panic, then beg, then submit, and another world would join the Conclave's collection of servant races. His communication officer sent the message to every screen, every radio, every device on the planet below. People of Earth. Vorath's translated voice echoed across the world. You are now subjects of the Conclave of 12, and your days of freedom have ended. So listen carefully to your new masters, he explained. The terms in a voice that carried no emotion. Humanity would surrender all weapons within one. They would submit to sterilization quotas that would reduce their population by 90% over 3 generations. The survivors would serve as laborers for the Conclave's mining operations. Any resistance would result in the complete destruction of all life on Earth. Earth expected screaming and chaos, but instead the humans did something strange. They asked for a meeting. Agreed, because it amused him to watch primitives try to negotiate when they had nothing to offer. The meeting took place in a bunker beneath the mountains of Switzerland, a place the humans called secure. Though Vorath could have destroyed it with a single shot from orbit, Secretary General Chen Wei sat across from him. A small woman with gray hair and eyes that showed no fear behind her stood. Representatives from every nation on Earth, and not one of them was crying or trembling. Vorath found this irritating. You understand your situation, he said through his translator device. So let us not waste time with foolish pride. Simply agree to our terms, and your species will be allowed to continue existing in some reduced form. Chen Wei folded her hands on the table and looked at him the way a teacher might look at a student who had failed to do his homework. Ambassador Vorath, she said in a calm and steady voice, I think there has been a misunderstanding here. Oh? Vorath's skin rippled with what passed for amusement among his kind. We did not ask for this meeting to discuss our surrender. Chen Wei continued. We asked for this meeting to offer you a chance to leave. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Vorath laughed. A wet and bubbling sound that made the human guards reach for their weapons. You have no fleet, he said when he finished laughing. No faster than light technology. No weapons that could scratch the hull of my smallest ship. And yet, you threaten us. We are not threatening you, Chen Wei replied. We are warning you. And there is a difference. She reached into a folder and pulled out a single document, sliding it across the table toward him. 200 years ago, she began, our scientists detected signals from deep space, and they realized we were not alone in the universe. Vorath's laughter died in his throat. We are not fools, Ambassador, and we knew that whoever was out there might not be friendly. So we began to prepare. She tapped the document with one finger. This is called the Prometheus Contingency, and it represents 2 centuries of secret work by the greatest minds our species has ever produced. Vorath picked up the document and began to read. And as he read, the color drained from his alien face. You are bluffing, he whispered. But his voice had lost its confidence. We mapped your territory using probes you never detected, Chen Wei said. We studied the wreckage of scout ships that crashed on our world over the centuries. And we reverse-engineered technology your kind thought was beyond our understanding. She leaned forward. And for the first time, Vara saw something in her eyes that made him afraid. We built weapons. Ambassador, weapons so terrible that we hoped we would never have to use them. Weapons that your conclave banned millions of years ago because they were too horrific even for conquerors like you. Vara stood up so quickly that his chair fell backward. This is impossible. He hissed. You are primitives, you are insects. You cannot have. We have. Chunwei interrupted him. And now you have a choice. She stood as well. And though she was small and old and fragile, something about her made her seem larger than the alien towering over her. Take your ships and leave our solar system, she said. Go back to your conclave and tell them that Earth is not worth the cost. Tell them that humanity will not be enslaved. Not today, not ever. And if we refuse? Vorath managed to ask. Jen Wei smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then we will do what we have always done when our backs are against the wall, Ambassador. We will fight, and we will win, and when the dust settles, your conclave will be nothing but a memory. She walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at him. You have one day to make your decision, and I suggest you use that time wisely. The door closed behind her, and Varath was left standing in the silent room with a document in his hands that described horrors beyond imagination. He returned to his ship and sent an urgent message to the fine room with a document in his hands that described horrors beyond imagination. He returned to his ship and sent an urgent message to the fine room with a document in his hands to describe horrors beyond imagination. He returned to his Shinta an urgent message to the conclave homeworld, begging them to reconsider, warning them that these humans were not like the other species they had conquered, the conclaves. Response came within hours. They told him to stop, embarrassing himself with fairy tales about primitive apes. They ordered him to begin the invasion at Dawnvereth, closed his eyes, and felt something he had not felt in centuries of conquest. He felt afraid far below, in bunkers that stretched for thousands of kilometers beneath the Earth's surface. Humanity waited in silence. They had known this day would come. They had prepared for it, and they were ready to show the galaxy what happened when you threatened their home. The galaxy threatened Earth. Humanity responded with extinction. The attack began at sunrise. And it was beautiful in the way that only destruction can be. Beautiful pillars of light fell from the sky like the fingers of an angry god. And wherever they touched, cities turned to glass, and ash. New York vanished in a flash of white that could be seen from space. Tokyo followed seconds later. Then London, then Moscow, then Beijing. The conclave's weapons were efficient and merciless, designed to cause maximum terror with minimum effort. Ambassador Varath watched from his flagship as the death toll climbed into the billions. And he waited for the surrender that always came. It did not come instead. Earth's primitive defense systems roared to Liferelgans. Hidden in mountains fired metal slugs at incredible speeds, punching holes through 19 conclave warships before the fleet adjusted its shields. Nuclear missiles streaked upward from hidden silos, and though most were destroyed before reaching their targets, 3 found their marks. 3 more conclave vessels became expanding clouds of debris. Then something strange happened. Guns stopped firing. The missiles stopped launching. The radio waves that had been filled with human screaming and crying and praying went silent. Earth went completely and utterly quiet. Varath waited 1 hour, then 2, then 12. And still nothing came from the planet below. No surrender, no pleas for mercy, no desperate last attacks, just silence. What are they doing down there? He asked his tactical officer. The officer checked his instruments and shook his head in confusion. I am detecting no military activity, no government communications, no organized resistance of any kind, he reported. It is as if the entire species simply stopped existing. Varath felt a chill run through his body, but he pushed it aside. "Send ground teams to investigate," he ordered. "Perhaps they have accepted their defeat and are waiting for us to collect them." The ground teams landed in what had been Paris, a city that had somehow survived the initial bombardment. What they found made no sense. The streets were empty. The buildings were intact, but abandoned food sat rotting on tables. Vehicles sat in the middle of roads with their doors open, and toys lay scattered in playgrounds where no children played. 9 billion humans had lived on this planet just one day ago. Now there was no one. They cannot have just disappeared. Vorath snarled when he received the reports. "Search everywhere. Search the forests and the deserts and the oceans. Find them." The search parties spread across the globe, and everywhere they went, they found the same thing: empty cities, abandoned homes, and an eerie silence that seemed to press against their ears like a physical weight. One team discovered a massive tunnel entrance hidden in the mountains of Colorado. They followed it downward for kilometers, but it branched into hundreds of smaller tunnels that spread out in every direction like the roots of a great tree. The tunnels were too numerous to explore, too deep to bomb, too well hidden to map. General Yith of the ground forces stood in what had been Berlin and stared at a message that had been painted on the wall of an empty school. "You wanted our world." The message read, "You can have it. We do not need it anymore." Below the message was a digital timer, counting down from some unknown starting point. It had 4 days, 7 hours, and 23 minutes remaining. What happens when it reaches 0? One of Yith's soldiers, Iskidith, did not answer because he did not want to admit that he had no idea far beneath their feet, in bunkers that humanity had spent a century building in secret. The survivors of the attack were very much alive. They had known the bombardment was coming, and they had evacuated everyone they could in the hours before it began. Not everyone had made it to safety, and billions had died in the fire that fell from the sky. Those who remained did not weep or despair. They worked in vast underground laboratories. Scientists completed weapons that had been decades in development in huge manufacturing facilities powered by the heat of the Earth itself. Machines built armies of tiny drones that would change the nature of war forever in command centers buried so deep that no bomb could reach them. Generals and admirals planned the counterattack that would shock the Galactic Secretary General Chen Wei walked through one of these facilities, her face illuminated by the glow of screens showing the progress of their preparations. "How long until we are ready?" she asked the lead scientist, a young man named David Park, who had not slept in 3 days. "The first wave will be ready in 4 days, he replied. "The Reapers are self-replicating, so once we launch them, their numbers will grow exponentially as they travel." Chen Wei nodded and looked at a holographic display showing the locations of every conclave homeworld. There were 12 major worlds and hundreds of colonies, spread across thousands of light years. "And the delivery systems?" she asked. "The stolen FDL drives have been installed in the launch vehicles," Park confirmed. "Each payload will reach its target within weeks of launch." Chen Wei was silent for a long moment. "You understand what we are about to do?" she said finally. "We are not just defending ourselves. We are going to destroy entire civilizations." Park's face was pale but determined. "They killed billions of us," he said quietly. "They came here to enslave our children and sterilize our people. And they gave us no choice." "There is always a choice," Chen Wei replied, "and we have made ours. I just want to be certain that everyone understands the weight of it." She turned to address the thousands of workers and scientists and soldiers who had gathered to witness this moment. "In 4 days, she announced, her voice carrying through the underground chamber, "we will launch the Prometheus contingency, and the galaxy will learn what it means to threaten humanity." No one cheered. No one celebrated. They simply returned to their work with a grim and terrible purpose above ground. General Yith and his forces continued their futile search, unaware that beneath their feet, Humanity was preparing to unleash a horror that would make the Conclave's bombardment look like a gentle rain. The timer on the school wall continued to count down 4 days until everything changed. The galaxy threatened Earth. Humanity responded with extinction. The timer reached 0 at exactly midnight. And across the abandoned surface of Earth, 10,000 hidden silos opened their doors to the night sky general. Yith was standing in the ruins of London when his communication device screamed with warning signals. He looked up and saw trails of light rising from every horizon. Thousands upon thousands of rockets climbing toward the stars. "What is happening?" he demanded, grabbing the nearest technician by the arm. The technician's face had gone white with terror. "They are launching something," she stammered. "Thousands of projectiles heading in every direction. And our sensors cannot identify the payload." Youth watched the lights disappear into the darkness of space. And he felt a terrible certainty settle in his stomach. The humans had not been hiding. They had been waiting on his flagship. Ambassador Vorath screamed orders at his crew to intercept the launches. But there were too many of them. For every rocket the Conclave ships destroyed, 100 more slipped through into the void. Within an hour, the launches stopped. And Earth fell silent once again. Vorath stared at his tactical display, watching thousands of tiny dots spread outward from Earth like seeds scattered by a farmer. Each one was heading toward a different Conclave world. What have they launched? He whispered. No one had an answer. The answer came 3 weeks later. When the first payloads reached their destinations, the Kathrani colony of Vastoth Prime was a beautiful world of purple forests and silver seas, home to 800 million of Vorath's people. The human projectiles entered the atmosphere so quietly that no one noticed them. They were small, no larger than a human fist, and they broke apart as they fell, releasing billions of even smaller objects into the air and water. These were the Reapers, and they had been designed with a single purpose: to end life. Some carried weaponized diseases engineered to target specific alien. Biologism carried nanoscale machines that could disassemble organic matter at the molecular level. Some carried prions that would turn healthy tissue into poison over the course of days. The people of Vastoth Prime did not understand what was happening. At first a few became sick, then a few hundred, then a few thousand by the end of the first week. The hospitals were overflowing by the end of the second week. There were not enough healthy people left to bury the dead by the end of the third week. The last transmission from Vastoth Prime was a single word repeated over and over: "Why?" Then silence. Ambassador Vorath received the news on his flagship, still orbiting the quiet Earth, and he collapsed to his knees. 800 million of his people gone in less than a month, and this was only the beginning. The Reapers spread across the galaxy like a plague carried on the solar winds. They were patient and methodical, and they did not stop. One Conclave world after another went dark as the tiny machines did their terrible work. Some worlds lasted weeks, some lasted only days, but the result was always the same: silence. The Conclave's leadership gathered in emergency session on their capital world, screaming at each other and demanding solutions that no one could provide. "We must destroy Earth completely," one of the 12 lords shouted. "Reduce it to dust and vapor." "It will not help," another replied, his voice hollow with despair. "The weapons are already launched, already spreading, already killing. Destroying Earth now would only be revenge, not salvation." "Then what do we do?" No one had an answer on Earth. Humanity emerged from their bunkers and began to reclaim their ruined cities. The Conclave fleet had been recalled to defend their homeworlds, leaving Earth unguarded and free. Secretary General Chen Wei stood in the ashes of New York and looked up at the sky that was now empty of alien warships. A communication officer approached her with a portable broadcast device. "The system is ready," he said. "You can transmit to the entire galaxy." Chen Wei took a deep breath and pressed the activation button. Her voice reached every world that still had receivers to hear it. "This is Secretary General Chen Wei of the United Earth Government," she began, speaking to the conclave of 12 and to every species under their control. She paused, and when she continued, her voice was heavy with grief and determination. "You came to our world with threats of slavery and extinction, and you killed billions of our people in a single day. And you thought we would simply surrender because we were small and weak and alone." Her eyes hardened. "You were wrong. What you are now experiencing is the Prometheus contingency, our answer to your unprovoked aggression, and it will not stop until the conclave no longer exists across the galaxy." Beings of 100 different species listened in horror as this small, fragile-looking human pronounced judgment on the mightiest civilization in known space. "We did not want this war," Chen Wei continued. "We only wanted to live in peace, to explore the stars, to learn and grow and become something greater than we were. You took that future from us. So we have taken your future from you. This is not cruelty. This is consequence. This is not hatred. This is justice. And this is not a threat. This is a promise." She leaned closer to the broadcast device. "To any species that wishes to avoid the fate of the conclave, we offer a single chance. Surrender now, disarm completely, and accept human oversight of your civilization for the next 10 generations. Those who accept these terms will be spared. Those who refuse will join the conclave in extinction. You have 30 days to decide." The broadcast ended, and silence fell across the galaxy in the weeks that followed. 3 species surrendered immediately. Terrified beyond reason by what they had witnessed, the rest of the conclave refused. Determined to fight to the last, it was a decision they would not live long enough to regret. The galaxy threatened Earth. Humanity responded with Extinction Captain Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of the human dreadnought, Remembrance, and watched the stars blur as the ship jumped through faster than light space. 6 months ago, she had been a submarine commander in the Japanese Navy, hunting quietly through the depths of Earth's oceans. Now she was leading humanity's first interstellar fleet into the heart of enemy territory. The fleet consisted of 47 warships, built in secret over decades and launched in the weeks following the conclave's attack. They were not elegant vessels. They were brutal things, covered in armor and weapons, designed with a single purpose: to destroy anything that threatened humanity. "Captain," her tactical officer reported, "we are approaching the Kethrani homeworld, and we will exit FTL in approximately 10 minutes. Tanaka nodded and gripped the railing in front of her. The Kethrani were the ones who had led the attack on Earth. Ambassador Vorath had been one of them. They had ordered the bombardment that killed billions of innocent people, and now humanity was coming to return the favor. "All hands to battle stations," Tanaka ordered, her voice calm and steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. The fleet emerged from full space above a world that was already dying. These Reapers had arrived 6 hours before them, and their work was nearly complete. Tanaka stared at the view screen and felt her heart turn to ice. The planet below had once been covered in vast cities of gleaming metal and crystal, home to 12 billion Kethrani. Those cities were melting black clouds spread across the continents like spilled ink, the visible sign of nanomachines consuming everything they touched. The oceans had turned from blue to a sickly gray as the water itself was broken down into component elements, and from the planet's surface, a sound emerged on all frequencies, screaming, millions of voices crying out in terror and agony, begging for help that would never come. "My God," whispered Tanaka's first officer, a young man named James Chen, who was the grandson of the Secretary General. Tanaka said nothing. She simply watched for 3 days. The fleet held position above the Kethrani homeworld. They did not fire a single shot. There was no need. The Reapers did all the work. Patient and thorough and utterly without mercy on the second day. A transmission came from the surface. It was Ambassador Voratha's voice was weak and broken. So different from the arrogant tone he had used when delivering his ultimatum to Earth. Please, he begged. Please stop this. We surrender. We will do anything you ask. Just please make it stop. Tanaka opened a channel to respond. Ambassador Vorath, she said, I remember your words when you spoke to our people. You called us insects. You said we would serve as your slaves. You told us to surrender or die. She paused. We chose a third option. But we are sorry. Vorath sobbed. We were wrong. We see that now. Please, have mercy. Tanaka thought of New York, where her sister had lived with her 2 children. She thought of Tokyo, where her parents had been visiting friends when the fire fell. From the sky she thought of the billions of humans who had died in a single day because one alien species had decided they were not worth the trouble of negotiating with mercy, she repeated. The word as if tasting it. You showed us no mercy. Ambassador, you gave us no chance to negotiate, no opportunity to prove ourselves, no possibility of peace. You simply decided that we were beneath you, and you tried to destroy us. Her voice hardened. We are not as cruel as you were. We gave you a chance to surrender. You refused. This is the consequence of that choice. The transmission from Vorath dissolved into static, and it never resumed on the 4th day. The last Kathrani city went silent. 12 billion beings. An entire civilization that had existed for millions of years. Erased from the universe in less than a week, Tanaka ordered the fleet to move on. There were more conclave worlds to visit as the Remembrance jumped back into FTL space. Tanaka retreated to her quarters and locked the door. She sat on her bed and stared at her hands. The hands that had commanded a fleet that watched a genocide unfold. She had not fired a single weapon. She had not killed a single Kathrani personally, but she had watched. And she had done nothing to stop it. And she knew that made her responsible. A knock came at her door. Enter, she said quietly. James Chun stepped inside, his face pale and drawn. Captain, he said, I need to ask you something. Ask, are we the good guys? He asked, his voice cracking slightly. I keep trying to tell myself that they started this, that they killed billions of us first, that we had no choice. He sat down heavily in a chair. But I watched an entire species die today, and I did not feel like a hero. I felt like a monster. Tanaka was silent for a long moment. We are not heroes, she finally said. Heroes do not build weapons that can end civilizations. Heroes do not watch billions die and call it justice. She stood and walked to her window, looking out at the stars streaming past. But we are not monsters either. Not yet. The monsters would have enjoyed what we saw today. The monsters would have cheered and celebrated. The monsters would have called for more death, more destruction, more revenge. She turned to face him. We did none of those things. We watched, and we remembered. And we felt the weight of what we have become. That weight is important, Chun. That weight is what separates us from them. We must carry it with us always, never forgetting what we are capable of, never becoming comfortable with this terrible power. Chine nodded slowly. What happens when the war is over? He asked. Tanaka returned her gaze to the stars. Then we must decide what kind of species we want to be. Conquerors who rule through fear, or guardians who protect through strength. That choice will define humanity for the next 1,000,000 years. She placed a hand on his shoulder. For now, we fight. But we never stop asking the questions you asked tonight. That is how we stay human. The fleet continued its hunt across the galaxy, visiting one conclave world after another. Some they found already silent. The Reapers having finished their work, others they watched die. bearing witness to the price of threatening humanity, and through it all, they remembered. They would never forget. The galaxy threatened Earth. Humanity responded with extinction. 50 years had passed since the day the Conclave's fleet appeared above Earth, and the galaxy had been transformed beyond recognition. The Great Hall of the Assembly of Worlds floated in orbit around the neutral star, a massive station built to house representatives from 200 different species once. The Conclave of 12 had ruled this region of space with an iron fist, crushing any race that dared to challenge their dominance. Now the Conclave was gone, erased from existence by a species they had dismissed as primitive insects. In their place stood the Terran Accord, a human-led alliance that had brought something the galaxy had never known. Peace Ambassador Lin Chan stood at the podium in the center of the Great Hall. Looking out at the assembled delegates, she was 63 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and lines on her face that told the story of a life spent in service. Grandmother had been Secretary General Chun Wei, the woman who had looked an alien conqueror in the eye and told him to leave. Lin had inherited her grandmother's strength, along with the weight of what humanity had done to survive. 50 years ago today, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. The Conclave of 12 attacked my homeworld without warning or provocation. They killed 4 billion of my people in a single day. They planned to enslave the survivors and sterilize our population until we were nothing but a footnote in galactic history. The delegates listened in silence. Many of them had been victims of the Conclave themselves, species that had been conquered and enslaved generations ago for them. Humanity's victory had meant freedom. Others had been allies of the Conclave, and they listened with the knowledge that they had come very close to sharing the Conclave's fate. We did not want to become what we became. Lin continued. We did not dream of conquest or empire. We only wanted to explore the stars, to meet new species, to learn and grow and become something greater. She paused. Instead, we were forced to become something terrible. We built weapons that could end civilizations. We unleashed horrors that will haunt our species for as long as we exist. We watched entire worlds die and told ourselves it was necessary. Her voice softened. And it was necessary. The Conclave gave us no choice but extinction or victory. And we chose victory. But that does not make what we did any less horrific. She gestured to the massive wall behind her, covered from floor to ceiling with names, billions of names, written in hundreds of different scripts. This is the memorial wall, she said, and it contains the name of every being who died in the war, human and alien alike. 4 billion humans who died in the initial attack, 12 billion. Kathrani who died when we struck back, hundreds of billions. More from other Conclave species. We do not separate these names by species or by side. They are all victims of the same tragedy. A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. This was not the speech they had expected. They had expected a victory celebration, a reminder of human power, a warning to anyone who might think of challenging the Terran Accord. Instead, they were hearing a confession. You fear us, Lin said, addressing the fear directly. And you should. We have proven what we are capable of when we are threatened. The Reapers that destroyed the Conclave still exist, locked away in vaults beneath Earth's surface. If any species threatens us again, those weapons will be unleashed again. That is not a threat. It is simply a fact. But fear alone cannot build a lasting peace. Fear creates resentment, and resentment creates rebellion, and rebellion creates war. The Conclave ruled through fear for 3 million years. And look where it got them. She spread her hands wide. We want something different. We want a galaxy where no species has to fear extinction at the hands of another. We want a future where young beings of every race can look up at the stars and see possibilities instead of threats. We want peace, true peace, not the silence of subjugation. Lynn stepped out from behind the podium and walked among the delegates. The Terran Accord exists to enforce a single law, she said, and it is a simple one. No species shall threaten another with extinction. That law applies to everyone. It applies to the mighty and the weak. It applies to the old and the young. And yes, it applies to us. She stopped beside a delegate from the Veth, a small species that had been slaves of the Conclave for 2,000 years. If humanity ever threatens to destroy another species, she said, looking at the Veth representative, you have the right to call for our judgment before the assembly. If we are found guilty, we will accept the consequences. This is our promise to you. The Veth delegate stared at her with eyes that held centuries of suffering. You would truly submit to judgment? He asked. We would, Lynn replied, because that is the only way forward. We cannot build a just society while exempting ourselves from justice. We cannot demand peace while reserving the right to wage war without consequence. Either the law applies to everyone, or it means nothing. She returned to the podium and faced the assembly once more. 50 years ago, humanity was forced to become monsters to survive. Today, we choose to become something else. We choose to be guardians. We choose to protect the weak, to restrain the strong, and to ensure that no species ever faces the choice we faced. This is our burden, and we accept it willingly. She raised her hand in a gesture of respect to the assembled delegates. We are humanity. We have seen the worst of what we can be, and now we will show the galaxy the best. In orbit above the assembly station, the human fleet stood watch 1,000 ships, each one capable of destroying worlds. Each one crewed by men and women who remembered what their species had done. They were not conquerors, they were not heroes, they were guardians, bearing the weight of terrible power and the responsibility to use it wisely deep beneath Earth's surface. The Reapers waited in their vaults, silent and patient. They would remain there, a reminder and a warning. For as long as humanity existed, the galaxy had threatened Earth. Humanity had responded with extinction, and now, having proven what they could do, they chose to be better. That was the story they would tell for the next 1,000,000 years. That was the legacy of those who had sacrificed everything. That was the beginning of humanity's true place among the stars.